Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltiziak, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast, part of the Minute Media Podcast Network. The Detroit Lions are now in a new, grittier era, and we look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players, gaining more insight on what makes this team go. Welcome to another episode. In episode 257, we hit on all the major topics coming out of the NFL Combine. That includes the international game updates, info giving during the Campbell and Holmes press conferences, and some reaction to player news like Taylor Decker's announcement. We'll get to all of that and more. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
This is Corey Schlesinger, and you are listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
Joining me today is Coach Jerry Angers, former Michigan High School Coach of the Year. He's also been named Coach of the Week by the Detroit Lions. He is a scouting and training director for Bull Rush Sports. Coach, thanks for making time from that busy training schedule you got going on right now.
Well, I didn't do a lot of training the last few days. I just sat in front of the TV and watched the combine to see what our guys up against. And man, There's some dogs out there.
Always analyzing the competition. I like that about you, Coach. Joining Coach Angers and I is the sports writer of the year for Community Newspaper Holdings Incorporated. That's James Cook, the senior sports writer for the Traverse City Record Eagle. James, thank you for taking time from your busy sports schedule right now to join us for this as well.
This is the one day this week I don't have that I'm not going to be crazy busy at night, so it all works out. Plus, I'm happy to be in the time of. Plus, I'm happy to be in the time of the year where it's the transaction is the action.
There you go.
Yes, and we make your slow time busy for you today. So, well, while we're sending out the thank yous, I would like to thank our show sponsor, Roaster Jack Coffee Company in Traverse City. Since 1999, they've been roasting premium beans from small farms around the world, fresh to order, just for you. And the only thing better than great coffee is great coffee with a discount. Go to roasterjack.com. Use the code LIONS. It'll get you 20% off your next order. Roaster Jack Coffee. Be a hero, brew great coffee, and go Lions. All right, guys, James already alluded to it, right? No actual football, but lots of talking about football is what went on to start the week, and then the combine events ended it. So let's start with what Dan and Brad said at their pressers, and let's start with Taylor Decker. Brad mentioned that Taylor, they wanted to give him as much time as they needed him to reflect, but with the start of the new year coming, they wanted clarity, and they were looking for that in the next couple weeks. Well, they only had to wait a couple of hours before they got that clarity. Taylor Decker announced he's coming back. Before Dan heard about that, he had also spoken about the news or about the possibility, and he said they're going to need to find a guy either way. He said, Decker's got some things that need to be managed, so they're going to need somebody, whether it's in a crunch or as a starter. So that's important. They're going to be digging into the interior as well and who's going to be available and who they could go after and how that affects another position. So waiting it out a little bit. But let's start with the Decker news. James, how do you feel about the news that Decker's coming back, and what does it mean to you?
Well, it's good. It makes them not as desperate in the draft. They can, they don't have as big of a need there. I still think they're going to address that position somewhere fairly high in the draft. But it doesn't also maybe tip their hands to a lot of teams too. That the Lions have to draft a tackle at 17 or anything like that. Like they can kind of do what they want now, and they can go by their board a little bit more, I think. And Decker, hopefully with a year off, off season off, can get that shoulder back and have a better season next year. I mean, it was obviously really bugging him a lot last year. I mean, we all talked about his post-game comments after the last game about how much pain he was going through and everything. So just taking the off season, not working that shoulder, letting it heal, hopefully works wonders for him.
All right, Coach, how about you? What's your weigh in on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's locker room. It's he's been there. He's been through the grind. He's been through the goods and the bads. He's playing hurt last year. He graded out as high as most of the guys. I mean, it's a bonus. It's a plus, and it gives us another opportunity to work on our Canadian football player that he's coming into year 3, even though he missed the last year. And one of the things people. Again, I look at that because the Philadelphia Eagles, it took 3 years for them to turn that rugby player into an all-pro tackle. And this is where he's at year 3. So it's just a huge bonus for us.
Yeah, I look at it as it's a huge bonus, but it shouldn't change the plan
No.
because we know Skipper retired. You need somebody in the number 3 spot. Whether it is somebody that was already on the roster that's going to elevate to that or not is fine, but you've got to be planning for Decker's retirement, whether it's a year from now or 2 years from now. And whether he could, if somebody got injured, you want that quality depth. I think what it does is it lowers the need to go get a veteran free agent. I think that takes that off the board. But I do think you want to draft somebody, whether it's the first round, second round, it's going to be who's available. But I do think they're going to bring somebody else in to have more depth there. And it gives them time to groom somebody. Like you said, Coach, another year grooming behind him would be very beneficial. But the Lions have to have somebody else in. And that's just for the exterior part of that. The interior, we'll get into that more as we start looking at free agency in the next episode. But Taylor Decker being back means it's one less piece the Lions have to fully replace.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really good news.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we got to talk about another guy whose name has come up, and it's David Montgomery. I said I didn't want to talk about him anymore, guys. But at the combine, Campbell and Holmes were both asked about it. Dan said David's, he's another guy. He said, I like him. I'd like to give him space, unwind. He's a pro. We'll see where everything's at. And that's great, but Brad Holmes said they've been in touch with him. They would love to have him as a player. They want to be at a certain place, and those conversations are still fluid. So they've had healthy dialogue with David and his agent. And then there was noise all over Twitter on Sunday morning. So it's a wait and see. But here's like the breakdown, right? Dave Montgomery didn't get as many carries or wasn't involved as much as he would have liked to have been last year. Okay, so that makes sense. There's one detriment right there. Now, there's so many angles to this, you guys. Another area is the contract, okay? Dave Montgomery's not wanting to leave because he's not getting paid enough. That often happens with a running back, right? That's not the issue here. But the issue with the contract is the Lions are going to have to pay Jahmyr Gibbs. And so then how much money are you putting into the running back position that you can maybe use at other spots? But it doesn't sound like the Lions care about that right now because they haven't said anything about that. The Lions' tune is, we love David. We want him here if he wants to be here. It's not like the Lions aren't a winning team and David wants to go somewhere to win. They're already doing that. And as far as we know, the Lions aren't asking him to take a pay cut with the salary cap and stuff like that. So why would he want to go? I'm love to get a little bit of your analysis on this. We'll try and keep it as short as we can because it just seems like we're spinning the same stuff around. But James, what's your take on all this?
I don't know where else he would want to go. There's only going to be so many other openings in the NFL this season that aren't going to be committee jobs. The Cowboys re-signed their starting running back, so that's one that's gone. The Chiefs maybe but they've got a couple of guys coming back. They're going to rotate them in too. So that's going to be, and the Chiefs has just gone by committee over the last few years. So I don't know what roles there are that he could step into with a team where he could be the 1A running back at this point. Not because he doesn't have the talent, I just don't know that there's a whole lot of opportunities. A lot of teams have the running back set, and there's other good free agents out there too. I mean, Kenneth Walker's out there if somebody really wants to go spend some money and be pretty set at running back. I'm not sure where he's going to go or anything like that. I think it's just a thing where the Lions are saying, hey, if you really want to go somewhere else, we'll facilitate that, but we want you. And
Yeah.
Maybe he's been a little more wishy-washy than they've hoped or something. I don't know. I think that they're fine with going with him and having him as their second running back. Like everybody in the whole franchise has been saying, yeah, we want David Montgomery. Petzing said he wants him. Kafka said he wants him. Campbell, Holmes, everybody said they want him and stuff. So, and like you said, there's not been any talk that they have asked him to take a pay cut.
Right. And
he's not paid a ridiculous amount for a backup running back, especially one who plays a lot. So if it's just about playing time, then hey, maybe we're going to work to get you more involved.
Yeah. And so, Coach, so many teams are running back by committee. It's rare that you have one. And even the ones that do have a lead back. There's somebody else that's getting more and more carries today than there has been in the past. And so really the realistic thing is I think there's a lot of places Dave Montgomery could go and become the 1A instead of the 1B. And so, but is that necessary? I mean, you coach players, you have the insight that's different than what James and I have. What do you make of all this or any of this, or is there nothing to make of it?
I mean, I think people just throw things out there. I mean, we're trading Sam
Mhm.
Laporta too, I mean, it's just people throw things out to see what happens with it, and Monty's probably still upset from the last couple of years and his numbers going down. We've talked about that, but I still think he's gonna weigh every opportunity he has and where's the best fit for him. And we believe, hopefully he believes that the best fit for him is the Detroit Lions. And if he goes somewhere else, then the Lions will, I'm sure, we'll get somebody for him or something for him, and he can move on. But I don't know. I'm I think it's just that, yeah, he's complaining, but he hasn't complained out in the public. So I don't, I mean, we've not seen one thing in the social media from him, nor from the Lions, nor anything else. So we'll see what happens with it, and hopefully he's here.
The
Yep.
one thing
And,
we did,
go ahead.
oh, the one thing we did see from social media from David Montgomery was the report this morning that said that
Yeah,
he asked out and he replied to it and he's like, "Did anybody talk to me?"
yeah, yeah.
Pretty much, uh, and like he pretty much disputed that. So I think this
D-
is not a big deal until it becomes a big deal.
Hmm.
Kind
I
of.
think
Until
that's a
then, it's
good
just
way of putting it.
speculation. And where's there going to be a better situation than he's already on a team with a winning history the last few years where he's beloved in the locker room, beloved in the stadium. Those are things that he's going to consider. What's a better situation for him than what he's got right now? I don't know. There's a whole lot.
Yep.
If
And people are
if it's just a
talking.
matter of getting 4 or 5 more carries a game, is that enough for him to give up what he has in Detroit?
Right.
I guess that'll be up to him because people are talking salary thing. And, with Jahmyr Gibbs getting a new contract, he's going to get one. He doesn't have one yet, but it's not necessarily going to take effect this year because he's still under contract. So you still have the
Yeah.
space. Now, I do think the conversation could really come up next year because that would be a more logical time if Jahmyr Gibbs is getting a big pay raise.
Hmm.
But he's still under contract and there's no new contract that's been signed. So
Yep.
stay tuned until further notice, folks. I hope we're not talking about this again, other than a one-word thing or 2 words. He's staying. But let's stay with the offense. Let's move on. Brad Holmes brought up the fact that the Lions did not have to endure a whole lot of turnover this offseason, coaching wise.
Hmm.
Not having the wholesale turnover. He said it's the best of both worlds. They're excited about Drew Petzing coming on board and still retaining the others. And Dan talked about how offensively Drew's been getting up to speed on the terminology, getting together with Goff, making sure everything makes sense. He said, he's always liked watching Petzing from afar. He said, an Arizona coach, they use a lot of heavy sets, but he think that might have been due to maybe the way the roster went. He said, I don't see us for going that way, but we will be versatile, and he gives us the ability to make the most of what we have. And as we've heard, he understands the elements. He's coached multiple different positions, and within 20 minutes, he knew he was a right fit. So, what do you got here, Coach, on some of those thoughts by Campbell and Holmes about the continuity of the coaching staff much more this year than last year?
Well, I think the ones we added with Petzing and Kafka are just huge because I think they're both coming here for the right reason to help us win, to learn from Dan Campbell, and they're on the same page as Dan Campbell. And I think the other thing is Petzing, and that I love. They never really said it, but he's a problem solver, which you just mentioned that last year, they used 3 tight ends because of what they had on their roster. So he's a problem solver, and I think that's what Dan Campbell wants. He's got 2 guys right now with the rest of the staff, the continuity guys knowing each other, been around each other, talk to people. We're on practice squads, we're coaching things like that, and they're going to all fall into place and do what Dan wants them to do at their level. And Dan can go on and be the chairman, the president, the coach, the guy watching over everything and making the calls when need be. So I think it's just a huge, huge fit, and looking forward to watching it pan out.
Yeah, and yeah, you brought Mike Kafka, right?
Mhm.
Dan said they were high on him throughout the process and talked about how fortunate they were to bring him in as a pass game coordinator. So, like, you're right. There were two big additions to that. But so much of it is continuous from the year before. James, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, it was interesting. Mike Kafka did an interview with Tim Twentyman on the Lions website too, and and kind of like what Coach alluded to. One of the things he said is he's there to learn from Dan Campbell. Like he wants to be a head coach in the NFL, and he thinks coming to Detroit and learning from Dan Campbell is his way to do it. And
Nice.
so he pretty much came out and said that in that interview. That he's there to learn from Coach Campbell. He talked about learning from Dan. That was the first thing he talked about. Didn't talk about X's and O's. He talked about learning from Dan Campbell. Also said in that interview that he'd be working with all the offensive assistants, not just Petzing. So he'd be working all across the board. But it is nice that they don't have a tremendous amount of change in the coaches, especially on the defensive side. We'll get to that more later. But on the offensive side, it's largely, aside from the guy on top, largely the same. So and that's just a nice thing to have, not having wholesale changes like they did last year.
Well, one other thing off that too is those guys coming in, let them break down the game of the offense. Let them break down the film sessions. Dan's been spending a ton of time with the defense. And that's huge. I don't like this. Why do we do this? I don't want to do this. We should be doing this. And those are the things that are going to come into play, especially they're going to help Shep. And with new guys coming in like that to go over the offense that, have been play callers, have been in those situations. It's just tenfold on how much
Mhm.
better it's going to make the team.
Yeah, the Dan Skipper part where the on Twentyman's podcast was interesting too. He said the biggest adjustment to becoming a coach with the Lions when he started there was just all the computer stuff. He just gushed about how great all these guys are in Excel spreadsheets and how much he had to catch up with doing all that kind of stuff. He's like, it wasn't the X's and O's, it was the scouting reports, the all the paperwork and the spreadsheets and stuff. So that was kind of an interesting little insight from Skipper in that. And Steve Oliver, the new tight ends coach, was also in that interview, and one interesting thing he said was that they have a list of free agents that they're going to look at.
Oh,
Particularly in his group. So I thought that was interesting that he alluded to the fact that they're going to add to the tight end room via free agency.
all right. Well, I like the sound of that. Um, Coach, you already mentioned it, defense a little bit. Dan has been heavily involved with the defense. He's been able to now, right? He's been working with Calvin Shepard since they've been able to keep the staff intact. He said, Shepard did a good job this past season. He learned a lot, grew a ton, and loves the staff that's around him right now. They got a lot of flexibility in what they do. They just need to tighten the screws. Talked about adjustments in hindsight and liked what they saw with the opportunities going forward. Now, Coach, you kind of talked about this already, but by having both guys brought in on the offensive side there, Petzing and Kafka, this is going to allow Dan to work a little bit more with Calvin Shepard there. What are you liking to see out of the coaching aspect of the defense?
Well, I think, the one thing they talked about, I don't know, I can't remember who was talking about it, whether it was Shep or Dan, but the third and nine or less, we were a better defense than in third or 10 plus 1 yard.
Wow.
And I think it was some pretty close to that anyways. And
Yeah.
it might have been Dan that talked about it. And and that was something that he could look at and say, why are we doing this? What's going on? Why is this happening? Why is our defense better in a third down and shorter situation than a third and 10 plus situation? So again, now you got the head coach who also is an offensive coordinator, sits in that room and says, well, this is how I'm going to attack you. And this is what they did. And you guys, it's just, coaching wise, anytime you can pick each other's brains and communicate with each other and have your staff members or somebody from the new guys coming in and break down your reports, your scouting reports, or your game plans, it's just the changeover is just huge. And what success rate is going to be so much higher on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I love the outside guys coming in on the offense to even help with the defensive planning like that. Whether it's Dan going over there or those guys giving some insights from what they saw as well. James?
Yeah, and returning the whole thing complete is kind of interesting. They also denied an interview with the Jets for Jim O'Neill, who's their
Mhm.
safeties coach,
Yeah.
to keep it that way so that there was complete continuity. The Jets interviewed or requested an interview for him, and the Lions just said no. So they got to keep their entire defensive thing uh, together. And one of the things about the Kafka hire, I think, and Coach mentioned this kind of earlier. I think you're going to see Dan Campbell working more with the defense. I think that's part of Kafka's role is to allow
Mhm.
Campbell to do that. I don't know if you saw or not, but Nolan Bianchi had an article this weekend, and he kind of took Kelvin Shepherd to task a little bit for not taking enough responsibility for when things went wrong. And one of the quotes from it was, "I still cannot comprehend why he still feels the need to point out when things are not his fault. It is to me one of the most off-putting traits of a coach in this organization can have."
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't mean to jump in, but I don't read his. You know what I read his comments and stuff like that as is he's taking that stuff's taken care of in the locker room, not in the press conference.
Mhm.
And I don't think I've ever and you guys may. I don't think I've ever heard him say, so and so screwed up, and I'm a great coach, and from that, I mean, he would say stuff like, "Yeah, we just missed a few plays, we just, and he because that's him. I'll
Mhm.
guarantee he's taking full responsibility on that. I don't see that. I don't believe I would argue that with him if he would love to sit down and talk about it.
Coach, you'd love to sit down and talk with a few people you've
Oh
found
yes, I
on
would.
social media. So, well, Brad also shared a little bit about the big picture, which will help give you a good gauge as we start looking towards free agency here. And Brad talked a little bit about restructures and finances. The salary cap did go up, but the Lions still do need to make some adjustments. There's just one pot of money. That pot of money has to pay for the draft class, has to pay to develop and retain players. Plus, you've got to use that to bring in people. So, and retain means pay, right? And the more you retain, the smaller budget you have for free agency or the smaller flexibility to do that. But he said, the approach this year, it could be different. Now, what does that exactly mean? I don't know. Maybe it means they recognize there's some holes to fill. And another thing we're going to hear about is they talked about the word of needing to bring in competition. And so I think those are a couple things, Coach, that they're going to be looking at. James, let's start with you though. Thought on the Holmes's comments about all that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seemed to indicate he seemed to indicate reading between the lines a little bit that maybe he would be a little more aggressive than previous years in addressing some needs in free agency and stuff. Previously he's been all about saving cap space to re-sign his guys. People have criticized him for not making splash signings, even though there have been ones every year, they're just not as big of a splash signing as people wanted. Everybody wanted Trey Hendrickson or a big name like that, and they got DJ Reader and DJ Reed and Montgomery and ads like that over the last few years. Ones that were a little bit more fiscally solvent. And not just throwing money out there just to throw money at free agents. But I think part of that could be that, he was like, oh, I'm going to have to spend all this money to re-sign that 2023 draft class. And now some of that's a little bit murky with the injuries to Branch and Laporta, that maybe those extensions don't get done as soon as they may have, if at all, depending on how things work out.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot to look at there. And you got me nervous for a minute because I've forgotten. There's been so much randomness about the Lions on social media that I had forgotten about one of them until you brought up Trey Hendrickson. And it didn't involve Trey Hendrickson, but involved another guy at that position. And I'm just like, noise. Just please stop the noise. Uh, Coach, you already know about it. If I bring it up, your monitor will explode from the
Yeah,
glare you will give it.
I'm gonna leave that alone.
Yeah, but Coach, Campbell said when you go through what we went last year, you don't. It might have been Campbell, could have been Holmes. He said when you go through what we went through last year, you don't have a choice but to take some hard looks and be very open minded to make sure you're looking at all possibilities. What do you take away from that? You've had the luxury of coaching as a head coach from one season to the next and having roster changes and just, what do you take from those comments?
Well, a couple of them are, first of all, it takes two to tangle on these trades and splash plays. So if somebody else isn't, want to make it, and Holmes is always working to make sure that he gets the better end of the deal, which is what we want. I think, so if you go on that, I think we need more Josh Allens in the world that said, what do I need? $5 million more a year. I got enough. I got a house, I got a car, and I think something else. But anyways, that was a good article. But no, they the thing with that is when you start talking like that, then it becomes a thing where they have been so engulfed with we're going to take care of our own, long as our own takes care of us. Well, at this point, by going 9-8, some of the ones of our owns may have not taken care of us. They may have not done what we thought they were capable of doing. And so now it gets to a point where we're not going to hang on to that plus anymore. We're going to go out and maybe find somebody to replace. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Mhm.
100%. Because Campbell said after looking at those coaching aspects, they've got to look at the roster and it's where do we upgrade or where do we bring in competition? Because, he wouldn't list the positions of strength or weakness in the draft because he felt like those could change. Holmes did. But you're exactly right there, coach. If certain things didn't turn out the way they wanted, what do you do? Well, you change your philosophy a little bit while keeping those core values there, and that is bringing in more competition. I mean, a lot of people point out Christian Mahogany was given the left guard position before training camp even started.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think he may have earned it from the year before too, and he had to
Yeah.
have OTAs and stuff, and he must have went through, must have did some good things. Did he maybe, and again, now that you brought him up, did he improve enough throughout this year to warrant him keeping that position, or is it time to bring somebody in and make him make another step up? Maybe he didn't, he didn't produce or climb the ladder like they thought he was going to throughout the year. So we, again,
Mhm.
we're just bringing him up as an example. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah,
Yeah, and he
well,
was injured
they did
too.
bring in Miles Frazier as competition for him in the draft. It's just that he got hurt during
Right.
training camp too, so he wasn't the competition. So Jerry, which camp are you in? Are you in the two firsts and JMO or the two firsts and Amon-Ra St. Brown for Max Crosby?
James, I do not want
No.
coach's computer screen to crack before the show ends.
Oh, it just cracks me up some of the stuff,
I know.
Yeah.
and it's the two first and it's just
Yeah.
well, I'm gonna leave it
We'll
alone.
wait till we'll wait to free agency talk for that
Yeah,
one.
let's wait till there's an offer on the table and Holmes and Campbell
Uh,
will say, "Oh yeah, we're trying to do that."
now,
Hmm.
now, Coach Campbell did say their system has evolved. It
Mhm.
did evolve last year. It wasn't perfect. There's more room to grow. But he goes, it's now about some of those players getting to the next level. And
Mhm.
so that'll be interesting to see if they can take that step. And another thing I want to let you know is Roaster Jack Coffee might help you get to the next level, folks. If you've only tried one flavor of Roaster Jack Coffee, well, then you've only tried one flavor. We've been drinking the breakfast blend quite a bit for quite a while. We like it. But our most recent order, we switched it up a little bit, guys. We went with the dark roast and the French roast, and I got to tell you, we will be ordering those again. And if you want to check them out, go to roasterjack.com, use the code LIONS, get 20% off your next order. All right, this is combine news, but there's also stuff that happened at the combine on the field, you guys, and it's about time we get to that. Somebody did ask Coach Campbell about tape, and he said tape matters more than anything else from the combine workouts, is what he alluded to. That being said, there is some stuff that does matter, that does catch people's eyes, and does help adjust draft boards a little bit. James, you and I combined maybe have 1/25th of the watching experience or exposure that coach had. So I'm going to start with you. What was one of your takeaways from the combine?
Well, not neither of us has anywhere close to the eye-popping affinity to the NFL Combine like Jerry does. And one other person who apparently doesn't also is Aaron Glenn, uh, who got
True,
spotted
maybe.
falling asleep during the 40-yard dashes for the defensive lineman. But then they just traded for a defensive lineman, so maybe he's like, we don't need one now.
Right, right.
All right. Well, coach, what do you got? We got to summarize some of these things. What positions, look good or jumped out to you? You were tweeting to us about some of the safeties and the speeds
Yeah.
you were seeing there. So let's just start with that. What positions looked like they excelled that, hey, this might be a good draft for some of these spots?
Well, they set the record, I think, in every position on the average times and stuff like that. That beat out, the average times from end of the year for all the positions. I mean, your safeties. I didn't. I watched. I mean, I went through all those, but I really broke down the centers and the offensive tackles and the DNs because those are kind of positions of need. And then I did look at the safeties, but the depth at safety is huge. There's five, six, seven guys that you're gonna when you start talking five, six, seven deep in each position, then it's gonna drag down and late you're gonna get a solid football player later in the round. So I think that's and people have seen the numbers and stuff like that. So, but yeah, safety position, it was just the length and the speed of these guys is just unbelievable. When you're talking a 6'3", 6'4" guy, and the vertical jumps and the explosions they were having at. So, that was just another one of those positions that from watching guys saying, man, we're gonna get somebody out of this, and we're not gonna have to draft him in the second round, or maybe we trade up into the third round and waste a trade like we did on Tesla last year and get somebody in that area. Oh, we didn't wait. Tesla was pretty good, so but. If you want to go, I'll go through. I went, let's talk about the centers real quick. I watched,
Yeah.
the kid from Kansas State, Hecht, Jones from Iowa. Gilvin wasn't there from MSU. Slaughter is a dog from Florida.
Oh,
So
Slaughter. Yeah, I
yeah,
heard about
he's
him.
good. That Heck dude is I really liked him. Most of the guys on the combine were talking. There's three, four starters in this center group, which I had mentioned before. Logan, I really like. One of the things the tape, all these guys have tape. And I don't have time to go through to say how did they do against Miami, how did they do against this guy, how did they do against that. But they all have tape. So I looked at some of their numbers. One of the biggest things, the split. Everybody talks about the 40-yard dash, but when you're talking interior lineman, you're talking the split, and that means the 10-yard. How fast does that guy go from point A to the 10-yard mark? And one
Yeah.
split of 1.75 is really good for an offensive lineman. That's kind of the average. Hecht was a 174. Logan Jones was a 174. Slaughter was a 178. So you're looking at that, and then that Hecht ran his shuttles. He was the only one that ran the shuttle. His 40 was a 5.1. Then I look at their vert, because those are explosions. Can these guys explode? Can they get to the next level? 30 or higher is pretty elite for an offensive lineman. Hecht was a 28. Slaughter was a 32.5. And so you're starting to go, and then that out of the center wise with those guys, and then of course the arm length, and their arm lengths were all pretty decent, but Slaughter again was a 32 and 3/8, which long arms is get guy can get you off, plus he's long. So center wise, like I had mentioned, I thought there was three plug and plays.
Yeah.
um, Guys coming into this, watching the combine and not seeing some of the other guys, I think it's definitely going to be three to four guys. We got a possibility at center.
Mhm.
Um,
So I got to interrupt then and ask James this very ridiculous question that nobody needs asked or answered. But what's the over under on whichever team drafts Slaughter that the fan base tries to nickname him Sergeant Slaughter after, G.I. Joe and WWF and all that stuff?
I think the over under is about 110%.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Coach, that
One,
is exciting to hear that there's
Yeah.
so many quality centers out there that could be a plug and play because
Mhm.
we're going to talk about that in free agency.
Yeah.
And then the draft is what position or what direction the Lions might go.
Right. Right.
yeah.
And
One other
you're
center
right.
that I really like too is Pat Coogan from Indiana.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I heard an interview with him from the combine, and he just seems like a Lions guy. He is a student of the game. He's he talked about his whole thing just on the walk back from the huddle to, when you're going up to snap the ball, all the things he's looking at and reading and just diagnosing everything about what defense they're playing and what call he's going to have to make and what changes he's going to have to make and stuff like that. And he's that leader kind of guy too that the Lions seem to love, and all the character things are there for him. So he would be another guy I would kind of throw into that group maybe. And he's somebody who's not getting, for as
No,
lauded of an offensive lineman as he is, he's not getting the love as some of the other guys. Like, so he may slip in the draft. I don't know. Some of the mock drafts I've seen have him going surprisingly late.
yeah. Yeah, and it's weird for him too because he played at Notre Dame, then he went to Indiana. He was the leader on both of
Hmm.
those teams. He was the MVP of one of the bowl games. And I agree.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys. I think he's probably not the guy that's going to jump right in there and start right away or play right away. Where some of these other guys, again, after I'm not sure. I don't know if he tested today. I couldn't find his numbers. Um, I'll have to check it because I know some of those guys didn't do everything. Some just went and did some drill work, things like that. So, but he's another one. And again, that free agency, are we going to get a center and then get somebody, or are we going to get somebody that we want to plug right away? Again, this list here that I gave you and what you just talked about too is will really take phase next week if we go after and get a center. But
Yeah, and staying on the offensive line with Decker coming back, I don't expect the Lions to necessarily take an offensive tackle in the first round. Could happen, but I saw the interview with Monroe Freeling out of
oh,
Georgia,
oh, yeah,
and apparently Tate Ratledge hosted him on his official visit to Georgia, and he's going to Tate's wedding after the combine. And so I know those two things have nothing to do with his football play, but that's an interesting connection right there for a guy who already is highly regarded coming out.
for sure. And again, the splits on those guys. Frailing, Blake Miller from Clemson, who's a wrestler. I love him. He's 6'7", 317. His split was 176. He ran a 5.04. Long arms 34. His vertical jump was 32. His broad jump was 9.95. Those are all elite. I don't want to say great numbers. I'm not going to say elite. Let's say great
Yeah.
numbers. And then you got Freeling. He was a 171, guys, in his split. Again, the guy gets off the ball and he's 6'7". He ran a 4.93, 33 and a half inch vertical jump. Explosion, guys. I mean, Proctor's a freak from Alabama. He's 352 pounds, ran a 184 split, guys. He had a 32.5 vert. The reason I'm giving all these numbers is because if we don't need a tackle right now, we're going to get a really good tackle, I think, late, maybe second, maybe third, because there's so many of them. Fano, Dunker from Iowa, I think he'll end up going inside. I love his flow. Ratledge is going to have to get his flow back if Dunker gets there. Again, 184. Fan and Spencer from Utah, 172, 491. I mean, I can throw you numbers and then I'm watching the drill work on these guys afterwards, because again, they have tape.
Yep.
But when you watch them doing this drill work and the bend and then, doing things that they're not going to do on the football field, I think Miller was a guy that's always shopping for work, Detroit Lion guy, always shopping for work, looking to block somebody. So, there was just so many. And I'm going to tell you, the ASU guy, Max, I'm
Hmm.
not even going to try to pronounce his name.
I wouldn't either.
Dude, he's 6'6", 321. He is flying up the draft boards. He didn't play youth football. I don't even think he played high school
Nope.
football. He had a 176, 491, 30.5 vert, 9.7 broad jump, and he's 33.78 in arm length. I mean, I'm throwing numbers at you guys, but it's just I'm watching this guy. I saw him do his first drill. I saw his 40, and I'm going, wow, how come I don't know this guy? That he's been on a bunch of the boards. And
Yep.
then as I watched him, I'm going, whoa, and I know the scouts and the NFL teams are so, and you're looking at some long, tall guys, that the Lions are going to be able to snatch somewhere, and they're going to could be plug and play guys, and a few of these guys can go from tackle to guard and guard to tackle. So
Yeah.
it's a good draft for that, as we have heard.
All right. Well, James, any thoughts from you on the combine? Anything you picked up on or saw?
Yeah, I heard an interview with Freeling, the guy we were talking about
Yeah.
from Georgia, man. And just listening to him talk, he sounds like a Lions guy.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Just, like Jerry was talking about, he was somebody who looks for work every play.
Yeah.
There's sometimes where you just see a tackle when there's nobody lines up against him, they just kind of just look around or whatever. And on the tape, Freeling is one of those guys that no,
Yeah.
he's going to find somebody to hit on every play. So he's looking for work every play.
Yeah. Yeah. Getting
Cool.
in that last frame, I used to tell my guys, you better be in the last frame of the football clip. If you get 7 to 9 guys in the last frame of the football clip, whether it's offense, defense, you got some ball players. So yeah, it's deep. It's deep, like they said. And I just, again, they deserve the recognition that they're getting, and I think they'll all pan out. So
All right, Coach. Any other position group
oh,
or something that caught your eye? Just last thought or two before we transition to the next topic.
the edge players, the D tackles, edge players again. I'm gonna throw. I want to here. Just I'm gonna hit the edge quick because I go through. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys down that and these aren't the top 5 guys. These are guys that I found that weren't part of that elite 5. I think the edge guys. There's Bailey's rated 3, Reese is rated 4. The Ohio State guys are really slow. Bain is rated 6th. Mesidor is rated number 20, and then Howell from Texas A&M is rated number 21 draft. They feel they're all first round guys. Their
Okay.
numbers are off the board. So let me throw edge since Hutch was 6'6", 260 pounds, ran a 161, ran a 4.15 pro agility, 3 cone, whatever you call it.
Yep.
That is flying. 4'7", 36-inch vert, 9'9", and in his length. Okay, so a couple of these guys, Lawrence from UCF, you got to look him up. He's from UCF, so he's not on that huge board, but he's 6'4", 253 pounds, 159. Hutch was a 161. He ran a
Wow.
4.52. Hutch ran a 4.75. He has a 40-inch vertical jump. He's blowing up the boards. I'm going to tell you, you're going to start seeing him jump up. The hoop drill that they run, it's a figure 8 drill where they have to pick up towels and put them down, and they got to show bend, and their feet have to be on the ground. And he was spot on with it. He blew that drill apart. And then I like the Llewellyn Max from Iowa. Freaking love him. He's from Iowa. He's a Midwest guy. He's 164. 481, 32. I mean, he's got numbers. He's just another one of those guys that I think were falling under the radar because of the big 5 I listed. Zion Young needs some work from Mississippi. He played at Michigan State before it was in Mississippi. He played at Michigan State. Before that, he's 6'6", 226. He didn't test. He just did his arms were 33. So
Okay.
height from Texas Tech. Oh my God. Parker from Clemson. There's just there's
So what I
I'm
hear you saying, Coach, is
I,
whether it's
I just
first round or second round, there should be
yeah.
some decent
Or,
options out there for the
or
Lions
third
at
round.
defensive end.
Or
Or third
third
round.
round.
Okay.
I
I
just
like
I
that.
think I think there's just so many numbers in those things. But the problem is if these guys start to fall, then you know how it is. All of a sudden they start uh, uh, drafting them tight end, whatever, edge rusher, whatever. So I think that's one of the things. But there's just so many guys, and let me throw the edge thing at you real quick too. The time was 4.829, which is the best 40 average 40 time of edge rushers since 2023 class. The 2023 class had Carter, Nolan, Smith, Cansey, Mazzie Smith, and Miles Murphy, to name a few. So you're talking about what are those guys doing right now in the league? That's 6 edge guys from 2023. I probably missed a few too. And so I think Will Anderson was a year after that, I believe, no, a year before that maybe. But anyways, my point is they're saying that these classes are loaded, and from what I watched on the combine, I felt they were.
Mhm.
Okay.
One thing with Llewellyn, I heard an interview with him as well from the combine on the radio that he did, and he was talking about how when he was a freshman in high school, his dad was the head coach. His dad was the varsity coach at his school. His dad didn't play him at all as a freshman.
Poor
He's like,
guy.
you're too small. You're too small. You're only 200 pounds. You want to play defensive end. You're too small.
Yeah.
You got to gain some weight. And so then he bulked up and started playing defensive end as a sophomore. Like his own dad was like, no, you're
Nope.
just not playing. Not big
All
enough.
right.
That's great. So yeah, so I think we're in good shape. So
All right. Well, the news officially came out last week that the Lions are playing in Germany. Pretty much a foregone conclusion as soon as we heard they were going international. Matt Derry from Locked On Lions says there is a source saying the opponent could be the New York Giants.
mm,
It'll be one of the Lions' home opponents. So we'll have to see whether it's a division rival or a non-division rival. My guess would be a non-division rival, but we also see, in Melbourne, you've got the NFC West teams playing each other. Um, St. Brown Brothers had Roger Goodell, the commissioner, on their show. He talked a little bit about Germany, about how the Lions are going to be hosting the game in Munich. The Lions do have marketing rights there, which we've known about. Roger Goodell said that St. Brown's family has played a role in helping build the game there. That there's been a fandom there even before Amon-Ra St. Brown, but obviously his connection has built it. And St. Brown said he does camps there, and kids know so much more about football than when he was a kid. He talked about when he was a kid, whenever they went there, they just would play soccer because nobody played football back then. But it's changing. So, James, what are your thoughts on this announcement, this partial announcement, I guess?
It's pretty much the least surprising news of the offseason, I think. Uh,
Right, there you go.
this was something that we expected.
Yeah.
The Lions have been telegraphing this kind of for a while. It was just kind of like, when's this just become official? And now it is.
Yeah. Coach, anything from you on this? I mean, the
I
thoughts
just
of now playing it.
I just love they had their Saints mom call and tell them speaking German that they were going there. It was just pretty cool.
I do like that reveal part. That's awesome
Yep.
having her involved as well.
Yep.
And it is cool. It's so special for the family. Um, Roger Goodell also talked about international stuff. The Lions are, I think, not Lions, but the NFL, I think, is having 9 international games this year, which is up from before. I think their goal is they went from 7. I think Roger Goodell said their goal is 16. It was asked him, I think Equinemius asked him about an international team. And they referenced Canada and Mexico being closer. Talked about Toronto with the popularity of other sports teams there for other sports. But I don't know. A lot to talk about, a lot to think about. But it wouldn't be a shock for them to continue with the international games because that's the direction the NFL seems to want to be expanding. James.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see I think it's an eventuality, right? But it'll be interesting to see how exactly they do that if they have another team located abroad.
Yeah, he did try to say to Equinemius or to Amon Ra actually that they would have a special airplane, so it'll be a little bit more luxurious than just flying a coach flight to the game. So I don't know what that means, and I think also because they were talking about how the NFL started, they had a Tokyo game back in like 1989, and Equinemius was telling the commissioner to enjoy his flight to Australia because it's not a short one. So. Well, sticking around with the international thing, the Olympics, we had the Winter Olympics going on. Well, they started talking about flag football in the Olympics. We know that's coming up. And Roger Goodell did confirm to Amon Ra and Equinemius that NFL players are allowed to participate. It's going to be in 2 years, and it's going to be in Los Angeles. So I think Amon Ra is quite excited about that. And also, they talked about the growth of flag football in general or across the country for boys and girls. Guys, I can relate to that. My twin daughters, I asked them if they wanted to do some flag football, and they said, sure. And I didn't know how they'd react to it, but I signed them up. There ended up not being any other coaches, so I coached, and they fell in love with the game. And we played every season until they aged out at the YMCA. And it's their favorite sport to play, even though they like basketball and softball and volleyball. Unfortunately, no middle school ones out there yet, but it is growing. It is growing in the state of Michigan. So maybe we will see that get to the high school level. And one more thing with the Olympics, it will not interfere with training camp. It actually gets done right before training camp starts. So NFL players can play, coach. It's a slightly different skill set, though, right? I mean, you're going to have what positions are going to be the ideal positions to play flag football? Any idea?
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to have a quarterback for sure, and then your wideouts. I mean, you're gonna have to have a snapper, which is probably gonna be a tight end, and go from there. So, probably your skill guys. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. Your DBs are going to be DBs because if they could catch the ball, they'd be wide receivers. So that's one of the big things. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I know that Tom Brady and you got to see that interview, him and Paul, right? Logan Paul, is that his name? Whatever. They got into a pretty good argument over skill set, and
Oh,
it's pretty funny. Oh yeah, you should look
okay.
that up. The Tom Brady telling him that he won't, the other one won't make the team, but it was pretty funny. So hey, yeah,
Uh,
it'll be fun. And going back to that, I think it's one of those things. I questioned. I was president of Pop Warner, for probably 10 years, as well as coaching high school. And, we had numerous conversations about, I think, I felt we should have some flag football. And of course, a lot of the hard-nosed old guys are like, no, they'll never be able to play tackle football because they're not tough. But, let people enjoy it. And I think it's fun. I think kids, different skill sets, different kids get an opportunity, and it's just awesome. So.
all right. And yeah, and James, the commissioner also talked about how if you're doing flag football, there's a lot fewer materials you need to have a game. You just get some flags and a ball, and you mark the out of bounds, and you can play a game.
Yeah.
So, James, any thoughts on Olympics, flag football, anything like that before we get into the report cards?
Nope, I got my report card for the Lions out right here.
Okay, well, the NFLPA report cards, a Twitter post, I forget who wrote it. They talked about how the NFLPA was told they were not allowed to publicly release it, but it didn't say they couldn't continue making one, is what it said. So, of course, now it just gets leaked out there. Well, Lions fans, if you haven't seen it, the Lions are in good shape. They got an A. They didn't get an A plus. There were a few A pluses, but they got an A. And last time I checked, that's pretty good. The Steelers and Cardinals and Bucks and Bengals came in below a C. Those were the four below a C. So I don't have the full Lions report card in front of me, James. Apparently you do. Any reactions to it? Of what you saw?
Yeah, and if you want, I can just read it off. So there's like, I don't know, 15 different areas that they give you a grade in.
Yep, I did see
For
it. I just don't have it
for
memorized.
the line, yeah. So the ones that the Lions got an A or an A minus in were nutritionist slash dietitian, locker room, training room, weight room, strength coaches, position coaches, special teams coordinator, head coach, general manager, and team ownership. They got a
Okay.
B in treatment of families. Home game field was a B minus. Food and dining area was a B. Defensive coordinator was a B. Travel was a B. The only thing that they did not get a B or better from was offensive coordinator, which was a C minus.
I was aware of that one. Coach, what does this tell you about a team? And do you think these are still good to do?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's good so that the ownership knows what the players and the public, or the families
Mhm.
are lacking. I think that's a big thing. I think last year, wasn't it? Our locker room was horrible. Didn't we get a really low grade on her? And what did the Lions do? They went in and fixed it. And now what was our grade on locker room now? A, right? A
A. Yep.
minus.
Yeah.
So I think that, and the nutritionists and things like that, a little detail, you take care of the little things, the big things will take care of themselves. I think it's part of the program. It's part of the company of the Detroit Lions. It's part of the team. But I don't know if we really need to know about them, but I think should keep that amongst the, in-house.
Yeah, I think it's great feedback for the owners to get from the players and the union. Um, do we need to know? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, is it interesting to know? Sure. But do we need to know? Not necessarily. But I'm glad they're still doing it. I'm glad the ownership's getting feedback from it. And, I'm sure everybody within the union knows. So that's what matters. Then they know which franchises have which reputations. And, if fans find out, I guess we find out. But I don't know that it needs to be there. But I'm glad it's happening. I'm glad there's communication. And that's how franchises get better and the whole game gets better, you would hope. Okay, guys, final thoughts here before we get out of here. James, what do you got?
You're not doing the basketball thing?
Oh, I am, but I figured
okay.
I'd get your final thought first, and then I'll go
Sorry.
to basketball.
Sorry, I was looking at the thing. So no, I'm good. I'm excited that the strengths of this draft line up almost exactly with the Detroit Lions needs or biggest needs this year. So that is just perfect. I'm just interested to see how much Brad Holmes does with this draft and how much he moves around to try to maximize those draft picks. Currently, the Lions have 3 6th-round picks. Projected to get a 6th-round comp pick as one of those 3, and Brad Holmes has nailed the 6th round in his entire tenure here. So that's been, he's nailed the 1st and 2nd pretty much his whole career too. Which if you can just do that as a general manager, you're worth it.
For sure.
You look at how many players in the 1st and 2nd round miss. It's ridiculous. Everybody thinks it's that you automatically get a Pro Bowler in the 1st round and 2nd rounders are automatic starters, and it is so much not that.
Yeah, there's a lot that things just don't work out early, and if you're making those early picks work out, that's a huge multiplier, which is a big reason why the Lions rebuild happened so well. It wasn't that they got all those picks in the trade; it's that they drafted well with those 1st and 2nd round picks multiple years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Coach, how about you? Got any final thoughts before we jump into Detroit Lions basketball?
Just looking towards the 9th. I want to see how this free agent thing's going to shake out. That'll determine that draft. So really looking forward to see who we go after.
All right. Well, before we get to that, it's March Madness. I mean, it's March 1st, so I know. Congratulations, Coach. I see you're wearing the Sparty jacket there. Yeah. They won their game, gearing up for March Madness. Detroit Lions basketball is back in action, you guys. It's early. It starts in early March. It goes into early May. They're going to dribble across the state, hitting 18 different locations when everything's said and done, going from Alpena to Pawpaw and Monroe to Traverse City with many stops in between. It is Detroit Lions Legends basketball. You get to see some former players out in the community. They help local communities raise money at the same time. If you're looking for the full schedule, you can go to HermanMorrisTackleLife.org page, or you can go to Wolverine Productions. They put it on. Find the full schedule there. James, have you ever covered an event like this? Have you ever attended any of them?
I'm trying to think. I think I went to one that had Frank Reich in it one time.
Oh, wow. They've been going on for a while.
Yeah. Way back in the day, I think Frank Reich was in Gaylord for something. I don't think he played in the basketball game, but he was there making an appearance type thing. But they're an interesting event.
It is. Coach, how about you? You've made it to at least one of these, I believe.
Oh, yeah, I've been to a few of them. I actually played in one of them. Played against the Lions back in probably 86.
No.
In Bay City. Yeah, we did a fundraiser. I was playing in a semi-pro charity league that Michigan had, and we did it for a fundraiser, and it was a lot of fun. I think I had 42 points, 18 boards, and they were trying to sign me, so I just want to let you know on that. But
there's no tape. They didn't do tape back then.
I can't. I have nothing. Nobody will believe me. So
yeah, I just want the tape of Coach drilling a 3 over Herman Moore or something,
yeah.
and just trash talking him the whole way down the floor.
Yeah. Herman says he talks a little bit.
The newest thing apparently is AI used to create fake highlight videos for sports. So you get something a little grainy, we might be able to get Coach in there. And yeah. But anyway, folks, it is a fun time. I've been to a couple of these myself, and so great way to meet some former Lions players, support the community at the same time. Also want to remind you, free agency is almost here. Look for our preview coming up later this week. Again, I want to thank our sponsor, Roaster Jack Coffee, for their support of the show over the past season. Visit roasterjack.com. Use the code LIONS. Gets 20% off your next order. Thank you for tuning in, folks. Please tell your friends and family about the show. Find us on social media like Twitter and Instagram, as well as all major streaming platforms. YouTube, of course, for the video version. Love to hear your thoughts and reviews, especially if they're positive. And check out more episodes and content at notthesameoldlions.com. Until next time, stay gritty, my friends.